All right. So here we are. This is Real Singers on Singing podcast number, I don't even know, 14 maybe? I think it's number 14 I've done. And we are with Mr. Silver. And do I call you, is your name Jeremy? Is that right?
Yeah, you can call me Jeremy. Yeah.
Jeremy?
Yeah.
And Jeremy, Mr. Silver, was a student of Tom Lomonaco. That's correct?
Right.
And so there's so much surrounding. A lot of people, I'm not an opera singer, but I'm a vocalist, and I've been studying with vocal coaches for years and years, and always reading books, and I have every book on the shelf, and I just always got into it, and the name always came up. And why don't you tell me how you got involved with that, how your career started? What was your whole career and your whole what happened with you, and how you became a vocal coach yourself?
Sure. So I started singing basically in college, and I was with a teacher there, and he really wasn't teaching the correct stuff. But what do you know when you're young? You just follow what the teachers say. So I was singing there, and then I ended up doing a senior recital, and there was a lady that came in and heard the recital, and she was a singer who had a career singing all over Europe, Paris Opera, sang with Pavarotti and all these people. She was a contralto. But anyway, so she heard me in the master class, and she was like, wow, like you have an incredible instrument. You need to kind of look beyond, the school here and try to find some more advanced teaching, basically. So she had me go and sing for her teacher, who was in New York, and he had been a student of Tom's, although he didn't really teach what Tom taught. But he was teaching a very different approach that wasn't based on placement or, trying to sing in the mask or anything like that. It was more an engaged sound, a deeper sound. So, that was kind of refreshing, because I always had a problem with higher notes trying to sing in the mask. So, he was really getting you to engage and sing out, although not really the right way. And I was with him for about 18 months, and he started to teach less and less. He was going through some personal stuff, and I remember writing to him and asking him, is there someone that you could send me to? Because I know you're, going through some stuff. So he ended up sending me to Tom. And he was like, Tom will, fix the top. Tom will open up your voice, Tom, So I was like, okay. And, I didn't know anything about, and at that time there was no social media, internet. I mean, you didn't know. So trusted him. And, so I went. And I remember the first lesson, I sang Per me giunto for Tom, and and I remember someone was there, and I said to him, I just needed help with the top notes, and he kind of just looked at me with a little grin, like, yeah, it's more than that. So we started working, and and that was kind of a quick lesson because it was more talking. The second lesson, I came in and he immediately went to work on getting rid of constrictive tensions, the Valsalva, getting rid of that, engaging the breathing properly, all that kind of stuff. So, it kind of bloomed from there. Yeah. So I was kind of lucky to get sent to him.
Yeah. Now, knowing that Tom was a student of Stanley, and I know Cornelius Reed was a student of Stanley. Yeah. And Stanley was a real, like, from what I hear, like, very strong-minded and, tough guy. And how did Tom's teaching, or how did Tom deal with Stanley? And then did he take, was it pretty much all Stanley's method, or he kind of made it his own afterwards?
Well, Stanley, he was, Stanley studied with Manuel Garcia. And according to Stanley, Garcia didn't know anything, which is surprising coming from Stanley. But Stanley, he was a highly intelligent guy, but extremely violent and very mean and rude and abusive. So Tom was studying with him, and of course, a lot of stuff worked because it was more based on function and science. So things worked, but Stanley was very hard to deal with. Tom said I would go up to have a lesson, and Stanley would say, "Why are you smiling? Why are you laughing? What? Everything was like a problem with him. So." He was like, you went through it and you put up with it because your voice did improve. However, he was wrong about some things. And I think it was just because he was limited where he was at that period of time. When he first started his first book, he wrote about breathing's not important. But then in 1953, when he wrote a book, he corrected as he gained more information. I was wrong. The breathing is really important. So he was trying to figure all this stuff out without much to really go on as far as science. He kind of did it himself. I mean, he did studies on Martinelli at New York University, and tested the voice. But he did have some things wrong. He thought that overtones came from the falsetto, and they don't come from the falsetto, they come from the chest. So he'd have Tom demonstrate, for example, with a spectrograph there, and Tom would sing really, dark falsetto, and then no spikes would happen within the spectrograph because falsetto doesn't really produce overtones. So then he'd yell at Tom, "You're not trying hard," So but then later Tom corrected all that kind of misinformation. Now it comes from the chest. Stanley didn't teach what covering was. He kind of just went by chest and falsetto in these two groups of muscle, which isn't exactly how it works, although it's better to kind of do what he was saying than what a lot of other teachers were saying. And Tom really advanced all that. Tom, he took out the stuff that was incorrect and advanced that, and he discovered the Valsalva maneuver and how it's bad in singing. That's when the throat closes, when you
that's like a grunt, like when you're picking something up,
when you grunt, when you cough, when so he figured that out, and how the vocal cords need to vibrate freely through the release of the air, and the breathing's important to hold the throat open to be able to do that. And he really advanced the science beyond what Stanley had and corrected the kind of violent stuff Stanley would do.
Gotcha. And so since you're kind of going into the technique, and I know you're very outspoken about the technique, which I love. I love seeing your posts. I do. I've been seeing you I've been actually seeing you for years. You know what I mean? But I just never. I think I contacted you years ago. But anyway, I want to get to the technique part of it because you started. So the technique. Now, do you use the tongue instrument?
I do use the tongue instrument when it's necessary, but I don't use it a lot. The tongue instrument, the thing with Tom's approach, I studied with Tom 10 years, a couple times a week for about 10 years. And not only did I do that, I consider myself a little different in that I made the conscious decision of wanting to learn how to teach the method, which is very different than coming in and saying, teach me how to sing, get my voice in good condition, now I'm going to go out and sing. Because everybody that comes in with a little different issue. And you might not do every exercise with every student, or might not do it in the same order.
Right.
Because every exercise has a physiological function. And a lot of people that took lessons with Tom, he did certain exercises, but they don't understand the physiological function behind it, and why he did a certain exercise and why at a certain time. So I made the conscious decision to really study the physiology and study it with him and say to him, okay, what does that exercise do? What muscles are being worked there? Why do we do this exercise specifically? What are we aiming for with this? So, and even to the point of, sitting there and reading through his book with him and, catching errors and stuff like that. But so as far as the technique, it's very, very specific. Every exercise has a meaning. And if you don't understand how that, when someone comes in and for example, if someone comes in and they're singing with a deep, dark sound and the larynx is very low, we want the larynx low, but it has to be low with balance. It can't be low just with a lot of pressure on the down pull muscles, because there's muscles that pull the larynx up, pull it down, pull it forward, pull it back, which he called the vocal vectors. So Someone comes in with that, but then at the same time, they're doing it with too much pressure. Then you've got to balance that out. And there's exercises that you do to kind of alleviate that pressure while still keeping it low. So that allows you to get rid of some of that squeeze and constriction and airflow. It changes the balance of the sound and allows more freedom because everything starts working more efficiently. So everything has a reason why you do it. So that person that comes in with that problem, I would never have them do certain exercises because it will exacerbate the problem. Someone else might come in and their larynx is not low, and I might have them do completely other group of exercises first to get that low.
Right.
And then you balance it out.
So I actually wrote that down. I got notes over here. So, okay, like what about how and the way that you look at breathing? Is it would you consider like the old Italian way, just appogio, or how do you look at it?
Well, we talk about appoggiare, which is to lean on, right? So, and if you read what Ruffo wrote or what Poncel wrote, keep the abdomen expansion going, never pull it in. The thing that happens with the breathing is there's the breathing in muscles, inspiratory muscles, which are the intercostals, the diaphragm, and then there's the expiratory muscles that expel air out, like when you cough. Or, those are the abdominal muscles. Only the abdominal muscles are expiratory muscles. So what happens is when you take a proper breath in, the throat opens, the diaphragm drops down into the abdomen expands. The ab muscles have to be relaxed because they pull in, and they have to be relaxed so that you can expand fully. Chest stays relaxed.
Do you keep the chest high?
No, and the thing is, when you keep the chest high, you end up bringing a lot of constrictive tension up, and also it pulls you out of the ability to do the breathing lower. For example, with women giving birth, they'll tell women when they don't want them to be able to push low to lift their chest really high because it stops you from being able to do anything lower. Like if you were standing there right now and I said, take a deep breath and you expanded your abdomen and I said, try to do it again and lift your chest, you can barely expand your abdomen very much because you've pulled up and out of that.
Gotcha.
Right? So you're pulling everything up instead of the diaphragm dropping down into the abdomen. So the breath in, the throat opens, that drops down. Anything to do with the rib cage, the back, the chest, all those things happen secondary. They're secondary things and they happen on their own. As you start to sing, now the ab muscles are going to pull in because they're muscles of exhalation. And you have to hold out the breathing in, the expansion against the pull in order to keep the throat open.
Right.
You have to keep established what you started, what opened the throat to begin with, which was the breathing in. And if you collapse that, you go into the larynx wants to pull up and back, and the throat wants to close, like in a cough.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's and then so I'm gonna love this because I can't wait to hear some of your answers. Where am I looking? So the tongue instrument we didn't talk about that much, but it pushes the tongue back and the tip up. Is that correct?
No.
Oh.
The tongue instrument goes underneath the tongue, and it deactivates interfering tongue muscles and activates the proper muscles. It activates the hyogenioglossus muscles and deactivates muscles that close the throat or muscles that get in the way.
And in that position, is you keep for every vowel?
Well, the tip never should go up. So imagine the instrument's kind of underneath your tongue, right? And you relax against the instrument. You take a breath in and you don't shove against the instrument. And it keeps those muscles active that are opening your throat. Now, what happens if you divide the tongue into thirds? The tip, the middle, the back. The tip retracts, and that happens naturally even when you're not singing. When you're just breathing or you're yawning, the tip will retract back, and that helps open the throat. The back, actually, the root comes up out of the throat, and there's a hold of one against the other, and then the middle of your tongue, the middle third, moves up and down to make the vowel. Mm-hmm. And you can see that very simply if you drop your jaw mm-hmm. and just say ah, a, and try not to move your tongue. You can.
Right.
The middle moves up and down. Mm-hmm. Now, the thing with that is, people hold the tongue behind the bottom teeth thinking that that gets the root out of your throat. Well, it does, but it also pulls your larynx up and forward. And so you get into like a constriction. You're not really holding the throat open. What happens is if you retract the tongue and the middle of the tongue makes the vowel clear, the root is automatically out of your throat. You can't make a clear vowel with a root in your throat.
So I know that some schools of thought do speak of, well, the tongue is going to hump up and back just for the vowels and different vowels, but to keep the tip against the bottom front teeth. But you say no against that.
Can't do that though. We'll try it. Try to open your mouth really wide and say ah, e, ah, a, ah, e. You can't. Right. You, ah, e, ah, and it pulls the larynx up and forward, which goes into throat closure.
Okay. And so. Now, going from that, so some of the schools of thought might say, well, if it's not there, you're going to lose some of the buzz or some of the ring. What do you say about those?
And it's actually the opposite, because the tongue, when the tip retracts and the throat opens, which helps you get the air through and vibrate the vocal cords freely, it also opens the pharyngeal space, which is the main resonator in the voice. The resonator isn't forward. It's not in the nose. It's not in the cheeks. Those are very, very minimal. And actually, they've done tests on that where they right. And it doesn't make any difference.
Not at all. Are you talking, when you say the pharyngeal space, you mean the nasopharynx?
So it's basically kind of like deep in the mouth. I mean, it includes the mouth, but really the space under the uvula in the back.
Okay.
See, that space really opens up and the throat opens up as the larynx lowers on the breathing in and the tongue retracts. That really, really opens. And that's your resonator. That's your drum, if you will. That's your pocket. And then the tongue moves to form the vowel. The core, which I think you call what you're talking about, the squealo, the ringing buzz, that comes from the energy given off by the vocal cords. And if that's not resonated properly, then it's limited. Or if you're squeezing the throat and the cords can't vibrate freely, it's not going to give off all the energy it can give off.
Would you say, this is a great thing, would you say when you the vocal cords obviously come to, they come close together to, vibrate with the air, obviously we stop them, yeah. Like the Valsalva thing, that's what that is, right? Mm-hmm. Doing that,
that's right. But there's degrees of that,
right? So you need something, something needs to bring them together, or we're just going to be right?
That's right. Yes.
So there is. So I think I read a passage of yours. I did some research the last couple of days. You talked about was it the LCA and the inner IA that bring the cords together, but you're against that, or
the LCA and the PCA. The lateral correct arytenoid and the posterior correct arytenoid.
Correct,
yeah. Well, this is the thing with those, and I was just explaining that recently to somebody. It's like anything that we do in life, walking down the street. I could walk down the street with my feet, with my toes pointed in. I could walk down the street with my feet out like a duck. I could do it, but that's not the most efficient way. So you can do it that way to get your cords to close that way, but it causes some other inefficiency and problem with the voice. What really should happen, see those muscles, I don't know if you know the physio. I'll explain it anyway.
I know some of it. Yeah, I know some of it. It'd be great to hear your side of it.
Yeah, so you have the vocal cords that come together at the Adam's apple, right? In a V, and then they go back and they're attached to the arytenoid cartilages, right? Each cord is attached to a arytenoid cartilage, which is they're kind of triangular shaped. Those arytenoid cartilages have LCA and PCA pull on them. One turns them one way and the other turns them the other way, and that will open or close the vocal cords. However, when you're singing, what you want is the LCA and PCA to hold against each other, which hold those cartilages in place, and then the chords are stretched or shortened or any number of things through the use of the thyroarytenoid or cricothyroids. So those hold in place, and then the chords stretch. The other muscles that come in to approximate the chords, the chest voice aids in approximation, but also transverse and oblique arytenoids aid in approximation, which give a completely different sound. That's why Delmonico, Tibaldi, all the sound very different than someone that's studying and trying to do the other way, which the voice ends up really getting thinned out. Usually they have a caprino or any number of problems because they're not really using the voice efficiently. And this actually was discussed by a voice. He wasn't actually a voice scientist in singing, but it was discovered by Brewer. There's a book, I have it in my closet, where he discovered even in different languages that have hyperfunction of the PCA or hyperfunction of the LCA have different vocal problems when they're speaking or when they're singing. Some that if you have hyperfunction of one, it can cause a lot of breathiness and airiness in the voice. If you have hyperfunction of the other, it can cause a lot of constriction, caprino, all this kind of stuff.
Would you say, in your professional opinion, that more pop and rock singers would sing that way?
No, not the good ones.
Who would you consider a good, like someone you like, that guy, he's got it, like he's doing it right?
Oh, like the old singers that were non-classical?
Yeah.
John Raitt was great. Whitney Houston in her prime was great. Hallie Jackson was great.
So lots of gospel singers. I saw you wrote that up.
Gospel, but John Raitt was Broadway, and did kind of Broadway singing. There's a ton of people singing that way. Anyone that has a deep, full chiaroscuro sound is going to be more likely singing that way than the other way, because like I said, the other way will cause breathiness or will cause constriction. And it's a funny thing, because if you look at all these modern tenors, a lot of them have caprino, and that's one of the reasons, because the voice isn't really being used in the way that it is most efficient, so it causes a problem. But any of those great, I listen to a lot of, not Brandi Carlile's great. She's modern. She sings like this way. There's a lot of people. I don't know. I can't. George Michael was great. He sang like this. The difference really is between classical and non-classical. Okay, so they don't sing with as low a larynx, but all other rules still apply. You have to have clarity and overtones. You have to have control over your vibrato. You have to have the right vibrato. You have to have the release and freedom of the airflow. You have to have head voice falsetto and chest. All the rules. They're just not doing it as deep. An opera singer, it's very deep, but they're less deep, but it's still the same rules. You have to understand the vowels. They can't be distorted. Mm-hmm. It's just less of a low larynx than a classical. Would you?
I know in Tom's teaching, because it's some of the stuff that you played. What are the pulses? Like he would have you pulse on something, right? Like 5 times.
Well, this is something that's very, very misused and misunderstood.
Oh, okay, that's good. I'm glad. I got a lot of little questions like this.
Yeah. The pulsations are when you have that hold of the inspiratory against the expiratory. The pulsations are basically a way to get you to release the air through using the vibrato. The pulsations are the vibrato with more intensity from the breathing muscles. With vibrato, you're basically always singing above and below the pitch. The vibrato action, there's a fluctuation. So you're above the pitch and then below the pitch. Above the pitch, you're a little louder. Below the pitch, you're quieter. So like, you're above and below the pitch. You're not, and the accent must be right. It must be louder above, quieter below. It's not as big above, but bigger below. And if that accent's off, the vibrato's off. So you hear a lot of people with all kinds of issues, where the accent's not right, or the caprino, or any number of things. So the pulsation starts to develop the correct action of the vibrato through the breathing. It's affected greatly by the breathing, but the vibrato comes from the abdominal breathing, the proper set of the breathing, and what's happening in the larynx. There's a tilting action that happens a lot. There's a rocking action. But if you do it too much just from the throat, you get the caprino. If you do it too much just from the abdomen, you get a wobble. So it's all about the balance. Now, if someone comes in and they're really weak with the breathing, you got to really spend time doing that one and then balance it out later. Or if someone comes in and they're all wobbly, then you got to kind of narrow that out. And you do that through the exercises, understanding what each exercise does. What do they accomplish? They're not just, sing notes for the sake of notes. Everything has a reason, right? So with the pulse, you're breathing in, you're expanding, you're opening your throat, hey, and you're releasing the sound, and you repeat that, hey, and it goes into a vibrato, and it keeps the release going. The higher we go or the louder we go, the more of that we need to keep the voice free. And you'll see often singers that have a problem with the top, like the very top, they end up kind of straight toning and then their voice gives out. When the really good singers, if you listen to Caruso and all them, the vibrato will intensify in the top.
Right. Yeah, it's like there's an extra release.
Yeah, and there's videos. I mean, I don't know if you've seen them on my page, but there's videos you can see Tom Lomonaco, Corelli, all different singers pulsing. You can see them physically doing it.
And Corelli, in the beginning of his career, didn't he have the fast one?
Yeah, and he corrected it through the breathing, he said, which is right. Yeah, because
and he was from the Maloki school is pretty much the same type of idea as what we're talking, right?
It's very similar. I mean, Tom really had this. There's always two parts to it. There's the science part, and then there's the ear. Mm-hmm. So, like Tom used to say, you can know all the science and not have the right sound in your ear, so you're not teaching the right thing. Or you can have the right sound in your ear, but you don't understand the science, so you're not really as precise with why we do certain exercises and why to certain, there's. He didn't really tell people. That's one of the big problems when I think back with Tom is you kind of had to try to pry it out of him. Like after years and years of me asking, what's this, what's that, what, and he would just look at me and smile and go, do you think that'll help you if you know and I'm like, I had to kind of, by the end, forced him to tell me in a way, but he saw that I was studying the physiology. I was studying so he could actually talk to me about it. Because what's the point in someone saying, well, what does that do? And I say, well, the PCA holds against the LCA. If they haven't even studied the physiology, it's meaningless, So that's kind of how he felt, But every exercise had a reason, and it was tied to a physiological action, and trying to get that balanced out.
So I see, because reading the books and looking on the websites and stuff, he would take, say, like your chest voice and bring that up to maybe like a B, 3 before the middle C. And then he would take the middle C up to like an E flat or an E on a different vowel for the middle, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And was that like a brighter tone from that C to E flat or whatever?
No, what it was, and, I'll say it again. And I know there's a lot of people that study with Tom and they don't like when I say stuff like that, but too bad. Because Tom didn't recommend students to go to other people. He recommended they come to me. And it was for this reason, because I understood this stuff because I studied it with him. What happens is you have a mini passagio there.
Right.
B3, A3, which is an acoustical switch. The major passagio, E, F, is a physiological shift. So, like, for example, if you're doing it's got to go deeper at some point. Otherwise, you can't do that. So there's an acoustical switch, and that acoustical switch helps you to maintain the lowering of the larynx, you see? So when you get up, and you go more Now, as you get up here, where the passagio, now there's a physical switch that happens, and that's the main passagio.
And that's where you're covered. You cover.
Yeah, and that's the difference between a physical oh, and acoustical, oh, which is just an acoustical change. It's not so majorly physical. That physical switch is a muscular action that has to be developed. And in the course of developing that, someone comes in, they can't really cover well because it's a muscular switch. Those muscles have to be developed.
Falsetto. What would you say? That's the falsetto. Then you work the falsetto.
Well, the falsetto helps to stretch the chords after a certain point, right? So you get to a certain point in your range and the chest can't do it all. The falsetto starts to help. Falsetto, not really falsetto because you're still in chest, but the cricothyroids, let's say, help to stretch the chords more. But you don't lessen the chest. What happens is the stylohyoid group of muscles comes in to keep the larynx low and in position to keep the pharyngeal space open and deep. You'll notice when you don't cover, you lose depth.
Right.
With that muscle coming in and keeping the depth and the opening of the pharyngeal space, that causes the cover to happen. Which gives you more depth, more fullness to the sound. But it's not a lessening of the chest.
It's not. So it's not a lessening. Where, as with maybe other schools of thought, like we were talking about the LCA working, it would probably switch to that.
Right, which makes them go very light and stringy and constricted and go more kind of into a head voice kind of sound, which even that they don't really do right. But none of those old singers from Corelli, Caruso, all the way up through did head voice. They did covered chest. I mean, it's very clear when a man sings an A flat or an A, it's a very different sound than a woman doing it in classical music. They don't make the same sound because they're doing head voice. A countertenor does what a woman does. They do head voice.
Right.
Or if you're singing very quietly, you might go more towards head voice. But the covered full voice is full chest, but that group of muscles has to come in and be trained to do it. And in the course of developing that, you often exaggerate that switch for a while to an extreme so this person gets used to feeling that switch. The problem is you don't stay there. Once it's developed, you've got to pull it back to the middle where there's clarity and core and all that stuff, not where it's kind of overly dark and kind of blown out.
It can get a little woofy, right?
Right, which is absolutely wrong, but which might happen in the course of development. But that's only the first step of development. And then eventually you bring it back and you learn how to keep core within that opening and within the switch. And at first you might lose some core, so it's all developmental and happens over time.
It seems also like in reading all the stuff about Tom and you and Stanley, the falsetto was so particular that they wanted.
Yeah, it's got to be very clear. It can't be breathy or airy. It's got to be dark, and clear. And you should be able to go from falsetto more into full voice and back if there's balance and efficiency going on. The quieter you sing, the more you go kind of towards falsetto, just like if I was speaking. Right. The louder you go more towards shit. That's just a natural function of the human voice.
Right. So like diminuendo is kind of like Di Stefano, like how beautifully he would do it, right? He'd go so quiet, and then on the same note, just be same with Corelli too, on like B flats. That's what's happening. It's like
and I mean you can kind of hear very clearly, especially in Di Stefano, or some are a little better than others in the way they do it. But Di Stefano was a real master at that, or Malapiero was good at that, or Hadley was really good at that in his prime because he was taught that. But yeah, you'll hear the louder, the more chest and even more vibrato. The quieter it starts to go more towards like a falsetto sound.
But it's never going to falsetto.
It never goes to pure falsetto. And this is one of the big confusion about falsetto. Pure falsetto is when only the edges of your chords vibrate.
And is that what you train?
We do train that, and depending on what each person needs, some people come in and they already have a pretty clear falsetto or even head voice, and you don't really need to do a mega amount with that. Some people come in and they can't make a falsetto at all.
So if you have like someone that has a very good falsetto, you wouldn't even work it too much.
No, I might still work it in conjunction with the dynamic, in conjunction with bringing chest into it.
When you do it, when you do the pure falsetto, do you do it with the low larynx as well?
Yeah, it should be a lower larynx. You should try to do it with a low larynx. But the thing that falsetto does is it elongates the chords to the max because you're only vibrating the edges of the chords. You see, right. So if you don't have the chest involved, which shortens the chords and fattens them, the chords are really long. Mm-hmm. So then if you add chest to a very long chord like that, you end up getting more sound.
Okay.
It's about efficiency. And it also, the falsetto is working those muscles of approximation without the use of chest. If you keep it clear, it's got to be focused. It can't be, breathy kind of falsetto. It has to be clear and focused.
Wouldn't some people come in the beginning, kind of, if they don't have a falsetto, have a very airy falsetto, and then after weeks of work, it could get more, instead of
much more airy.
No. It'd be more, woo, more like.
I've had guys come in and I say, go, woo, and they go, nothing comes out, literally. And then, in time, the falsetto starts to come in through the exercises and through, whatever that we do. If you can't do it, look, you might never sing a falsetto sound on the stage or anything, but the fact that you can't do it shows that there's a problem. Mm-hmm. Even if you never sing in it, you should be able to vocalize a falsetto. If you can't do it, something's not working right in your voice.
Yeah, do you? I want to get into that in a little bit. I was going to get into some of the health of the voice a little bit with you too. Yeah. When you said, okay, so are you familiar with Burton Coffin?
Little bit,
because like you said, you kind of said something that he says. There's a physical, there's acoustical switches, and then there's physical.
Yeah.
Right. And he looks at them as registers. There's acoustical registers and then physical registers, or something like that. The physical one, the main passagio, the physical, where our body just naturally wants to go from one voice to the falsetto, right?
For men.
Yeah. That switch in there. Why not for women?
Because they don't cover. So it's more of an acoustical switch. See, head voice is still a form of chest voice. It's a lighter chest voice. So they're basically going from heavy chest on the bottom to a lighter chest. We're going from chest, covered chest, which is a huge physical thing.
And physical meaning something is switching in the pharynx.
Well, the stylo group of muscles comes in, it helps keep, and the infrahyoids work more, help keep the larynx low, help keep the pharyngeal space open. Otherwise, it goes yelly.
Right.
So that group comes in, and where women don't do that. Women don't cover. That's why it's a very different sound.
Do you find what about in rock and roll, like rock and pop? Do women cover in rock and pop?
I mean, technically, if a woman is singing really, really heavy chest and trying to keep it really dark to a certain point, it will start to kind of go into that covered sound.
Jennifer Hudson, Whitney Houston.
Yeah, I mean, really high, or Mahalia really high, but generally they don't. Generally, they keep it just open chest and then do a coordinated chest, which is something entirely different.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay.
And that's a Patti LaBelle kind of sound.
Right. Now, Patti LaBelle, one of my favorites, right?
Yeah.
So, like her, it's so seamless, like top to bottom, there's no change. Her Shaka Khan, like nothing changes.
Yeah.
And so you're saying, what is that? It's a coordinated chest up high.
It's a coordinated chest. So it's head voice with as much chest as you could possibly bring into the head voice without it going into a full deep kind of chest sound.
Would you say it's a certain voice type, or?
I mean, it's like with anything. Some people just have more facility with things than other people, like you go out and you want to teach a kid how to play tennis. One kid's going to have more facility how to hit the ball than another kid. It's just sometimes we just have that. And she was raised, her dad was a jazz singer. She was raised in a gospel choir, and she had this kind of facility that she never lost, although she did want to be an opera singer, I read somewhere.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but she's at the time where she was, it didn't work out that way, but she liked it, and, but she kept her head voice very strong, chest voice very strong, and I just saw her the other week and a half ago, 74, and she hasn't lost anything.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, and Lauryn Hill is a student of yours.
Yeah. She came to me with her voice almost completely gone.
That was after Miseducation when she kind of did the acoustic stuff and all that.
Yeah, that was just after that, and she almost and she would tell you she did. I mean, her voice was basically gone. When I went to her and I would say hey, and she'd go hey, she couldn't. It was so constricted and shut down from years of trying to sing and protect your voice and hold it. Any number of things. And we freed it up a lot. And she super talented, super nice person, very supportive of me and what I do. She does her own thing too. She's busy. She sings, a little bit of a workaholic in my opinion.
Yeah. That record was one of my favorite, Miseducation. Yeah. In my car, I remember that time. It didn't come out of my car for like a year. I love that record.
Yeah, she's a great, great person. Very supportive of other artists. She's a great lady. Yeah.
And getting back to some of the singers with the technique that you can see that they're using it properly. Would you say a lot of the old the teachers that came out of like Bologna in that area from years and years ago, like I can't even pronounce his name great, but Ettore Campogalliani, and he was like I know that we put up Mirella Freni has worked with him and Pola and Raimondi. Those singers are all pretty much in the same thing with what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And you obviously I noticed that you really like Delmonico, Corelli. I see those on your posts a lot.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I never heard him teach, so I don't know exactly what he did. What my guess would be, having heard a lot of lessons of Pavarotti with Pola, is that it was more just imitation of the sound. Pola doesn't really talk in terms of technical, your chest voice, your head voice. He basically would demonstrate the sound, saying or whatever, and then it's he demonstrated a covered sound. And, okay, try to do that. So it was kind of very primal, if you will, just imitation, which actually was Tom. For when you would go into Tom, you just imitate the sounds that he was doing. He'd say, "No, you're going and it's and you would just, it was straight up imitation." He's playing a little bit, that works. I mean, you learn through imitation, not copying, but definitely imitation.
I love that you just said that. So what do you think about the teachers out there that I know this is going to be great, because I know I myself, just being, I do coach students, but, I tend to demonstrate almost too much. Like I got to go on voice rest every once in a while. As I'm so many students a day and I'm demonstrating every scale, I get tired.
Right.
But what do you think about these coaches that don't demonstrate at all? And they're out there and they're flourishing.
You want my honest opinion?
Please, don't hold back. I think some people have actually mentioned, I put up on a couple boards that I was going to be, I didn't say your name, but interviewing someone that studied with Tom, and a couple people were like, "Oh, get Mr. Silver on there. He's very outspoken. We like the way he looks at things." Like people were they kind of like your controversy because you kind of call out a little bit, which I think is a good thing, because I studied with many coaches in my time that didn't demonstrate. And I would be like, "Well, what do I do?" "Well, just do the exercise." "Well, what do I do?" But then my last coach was amazing. Like, I was very happy I found him. His name was Alex Kariotis, and he demonstrated everything perfectly. And my ear just wasn't in tune with it. I'm still coming along with it,
Well, I think it's a huge problem because maybe you could get away with that for kind of an elementary level kind of singing. But when you're talking about going around and teaching people opera, which is like the Olympics, when you're trying to teach these super vocal talents, and you can't even make a legitimate sound, you have no business doing what you're doing, because you have to be able to demonstrate to somebody, no, it's this sound. You got to do this and see this. And if you've never experienced being able to make that sound, how are you going to? That's also why I have a problem with women teaching men in opera, because they don't cover. So they have no concept of what that is, how they feel. Even if they hear it and kind of understand it, you don't really understand it because you haven't experienced it. It's not a deep enough understanding. So, but these guys, I hear them demonstrate, and it's like, the singer's going to imitate what you're doing. I've had a lot of students come from people like David Jones or people like Schumann or people like that, and I've had to, you outright have to correct the ridiculous sounds these people are making. I mean, I had a tenor, and a lot of times what happens, actually, funnily enough, is they end up giving me recordings of their lessons that they had with these people because they're so angry after freeing up their voice. They're like, these people, I just had a guy the other day, a week ago, baritone. He was like, Jones ruined my voice. I went to Oswald. I went to Jones. I went to Shit, and they all ruined my voice.
Is that Mark Oswald? I know. Was he a baritone, right?
Yeah. And, and we've just had a few lessons. His voice is already completely changed and freeing up. And they get really, really angry, because they're like, you're spending all this money. These guys are charging $200 an hour, which, by the way, is really, for me, obnoxious, because there's nothing you can do in one lesson that merits $200.
That's right.
So you don't really care about their voices. You care about making money. And the other problem is if you're not demonstrating, you're leaving the singer just to guess. I mean, yeah. You also have to be able to tell, you have to understand the sound. If someone's singing a certain sound, no, it's not quite like that because it's imbalanced. It's got to be more like this. So I'll often demonstrate what they're doing, and then I demonstrate the right balanced sound right after it. Tom did the same thing. So, but even beyond that, I have a problem with, people like Jones who outright lie. He outright lies about Stanley. He writes in his stuff, Stanley has a tongue demonstrator which pushes your tongue down. You can't push a tongue down if it goes under your tongue. I mean, and he outright knows that. You can look at it in the book. There's pictures, and it shows. So I also have a problem with him because how are you going to describe yourself as a master teacher of a Swedish-Italian technique and your experience is one summer? One summer with these guys. That you don't learn in one summer? Are you joking? You don't learn anything in one summer. And then you list Swedish Italian people. And then he's teaching you to hold your tip behind your teeth and don't do the fiore di bocca with your mouth, which is the lip sword. And all the singers he's talking about do the opposite of what he's saying. It's like, what is going on with this? Or Trimble, he's another problem. Pull in and do all these bizarre things. They have people jumping on one foot trying to vocalize and bending. I don't know if you've watched any other.
Yeah,
videos.
breathe into the back, and
which has nothing to do with your back. Your abdominal muscles, which are literally the only muscles of exhalation, are not in your back, and that's what you have to resist. So doing all this weird stuff, it's opposite of what Rufo said, opposite of what Poncel, opposite of what most 98% of the old singers describe as the breathing.
Yeah, you describe it exactly the way my coach describes it.
But my real and you've probably seen me write this, and I'll probably go to my grave saying this. My real problem is if you can't show before and after results, then stop acting like an expert. I would never go to a car mechanic, a house painter, whatever, without them showing me the results. Oh, here's a house I painted. Here's a car I redid. Here's and just they don't show that. That's very weird to me, because you should be proud of your results. Look, I took this voice. It was a mess, and look, we've developed it to this point so far. Look, it works. You show your work and anything. And these guys claiming these grandiose things that don't produce anything. It's like, no, you've got to really show your results. I mean, there's a disaster in the vocal world right now. I mean, people are not singing at the level that they used to sing at. And you have these people going around teaching their technique to universities, teaching colleges, teaching other singers, and it's destroying them more and more and more. and it's got to stop. I mean, people are really getting tired of it too, I think.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think there needs to be demonstration. There needs to be proof that it needs to be before and afters. I think that is a good thing.
And I'm not saying everybody's out. All these teachers are out to just do bad things. No, I'm
no,
not saying.
I know you're not saying that. No.
But I've had teachers come to me. I had a teacher in the Bay Area, actually. I was in the Bay Area, and she was the head of NATS for the Bay Area. And she came to me and she had some lessons. And she was a student of one of these guys, Jones. And her voice started to free up in the lesson. And she said to me, "Oh, yeah, that's much easier. That's much freer." And I was like, "Oh, good." And then she said to me, "But I can't go back to all my students and tell them what I've been teaching them is wrong."
That's a common thing, I think, among colleges.
That's
I think so. I think so. Yeah.
I mean, that's wicked. Why not say, "Well, I've learned this other thing that might help you a little more," I mean, so you're purposely teaching wrong things now that you know that aren't right. I mean, it's a problem, really.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I agree with that. I want to go back to something because I got notes lying all over here. We talked about some gospel singers. What about a singer like, someone like Stevie Wonder, who's close to 70 now, still singing really well? Does he have that core sound that you're talking about?
Yeah, he does. He has that. I mean, he constricts a little more than I would like him to, but he doesn't do it to the point where it has shut him down. So that's the thing with constriction. No one has sung with 0% constriction, not even Caruso, not Tom, no one. But the best singers have the least amount of it, and the ones that last don't do it to the degree where it shuts their voice down. Now, that being said, if he got rid of some of that, he'd be even better.
Would you consider that constriction coming from like the Valsalva or the LCA, kind of those muscles coming in too much?
Yeah, it's a Valsalva, so he's using a little bit of throat closure to close the cords.
So you need more to combat that. It would be more breath flow.
Yeah,
breath pressure or breath flow. How do you look at it?
Flow. It can't be pressure because pressure is, that's the air getting stuck. Sul fiato, it has to be on the flow of the air. And to do that, the breathing has to hold the throat open. So if you're pulling in, it's not going to hold the throat open. Even if you get the breathing right, you start the note correctly, you could still squeeze afterward, So it's through the free flow of air and the cords closing just enough to vibrate freely, but not using squeezing of the throat to close.
Right, and as the voice goes higher, so say you get like the tenor high C, but some arias call for something higher, D or E flat, something like that. Is that another little acoustical switch around there, or are you staying in the same position from the C to the E?
Yeah, all the same.
All the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like I tell coloraturas or I tell tenors, don't flip into a constricted, uncovered, kind of squeezed, thinned out sound to make an E flat and then say, "Oh, I can sing or C." If you can't sing a legitimate sound all the way up, you're not that kind of tenor. It's like coloraturas. If you can't sing the E flat, like the B flat or the G flat, you're not a coloratura. So stop trying to squeak, constrict, pull off the voice, pull off the chords, do some kind of squeak and say, "Oh, well, I'm a coloratura now." That's not a legitimate sound. It's no more legitimate than me belching for a low note. I mean, you're not really singing with the chords. You're doing some kind of, and a lot of them end up singing on the false chords, which is a whole other thing. They, do some kind of squeak on the top. And, the old sopranos all kept the full voice all the way up to the E flat. So did the tenors. Laurie Volpe didn't switch into this weird sound to sing a D or an E flat. And, there's other tenors that sang up there as well and kept the full voice up there. Now, Corelli, there is a video of him singing up to an E flat, but he kind of goes head voice on the E flat, and you can hear him do it where the chest is engage, kind of more head voice than engage. But he wasn't that kind of tenor. He wasn't a Rossini tenor.
Right. What do you feel about Rossini tenors?
I think that if you're a Rossini tenor, you should be able to sing that legitimate covered chest all the way to your high notes. And if you can't, then you're not. And
that would you consider that more of the facility, like the size of the chords, the facility of the voice?
Yeah, I mean, really, the size of the voice has to do with a few things. It's the pharyngeal, the resonant space, like how big that is, the length, thickness, and the mass of the chords. Not just length and thickness, also the mass, which people leave out the mass because that has something to do with it as well. So maybe they're a little shorter, maybe thinner, maybe a little less mass than another tenor.
I see.
But like I said, Laurie Volpe keeps it all the way up there. There are tenors that kept that full voice all the way up there. But when you flip out into this constricted, really tight, squeeze sound, it's not only not very pleasing and really small, usually caprino, but it's really damaging because you're making the muscles that close your throat really strong. And then what happens is they try to do it lighter and lighter and lighter because the squeeze gets more and more and more. And usually you also hear a lack of overtones, although now they use equalizers to try to pump those up. But usually it's a little airy, you hear kind of static sound in the noise. That was never really part of opera. I don't,
Do you feel as the pitch rises, if we're going from say a F4 to high C, the volume is going to go with that, and that's going to be carried. The air is going to carry with it.
Yeah. So if you're keeping full covered chest, you're going to need more air and vibrato the higher you go, trying to keep that, and which means your breathing has to be really, really strong. The muscles that keep the larynx low, the covering muscles have to be really strong. The chest muscles have to be really strong, which is the thyroid. It all has to be really strong to keep that. Now, if you're going up and kind of going more mezzo voce or head voice, then you're going to diminish the amount of chest and go more towards falsetto. And that's part of the learning how to do dynamics.
Right. And does that come with do you figure if you can get it loudly, you can definitely get it softly?
Well, it's not so much about doing it loudly per se. It's about the efficiency. So I don't want someone to come in and sing loudly and just try to make it loud. I want them to try to get the air through freely, develop all the muscles, the chest voice muscles, all these things, and have it working efficiently. And when it's efficiently working and things are developed, it's going to be loud, but it actually feels easier. And right. That's one of the things people mistake. Oh, it's a big sound. It must be hard to do. No, it's big because it's free.
Right.
That was the old thing. And now if you try to sing big with the constriction, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, that's what happens. Like your voice kind of closes down, and then you're like, okay, I need more volume, but then you can't. You're stuck in the mud.
So you're fighting against the throat closure. And it's pressured. So you've got to get the breathing strong so that you can release the air through freely.
Is there certain exercise? Do you do other exercise? Do you do a separate like breathing exercise? Or are you just breathing with the singing?
That's with the singing. Well, it's always with the singing because really only in singing is the only thing that we do where you hold the breathing in muscles against the breathing out muscles. We don't really do that in any other activity. Like in sports, you have the inspiratory, expiratory, really working hard, but one's not holding against the other, except maybe swimming where when you're underwater, you're blowing air through.
Right.
While you're underwater.
So what do you think about these people that are coming out with the little straw instruments in the water and blowing?
Ridiculous. It has nothing to do with singing.
So getting on that, what do you think about let me see, how could we say this? You get a couple students, different students, or if someone's got that kind of squeezy pressed sound, you're going to try to work that pulsating vibrato to get them out of this.
Maybe that, or just the release. I might do straight tone.
Straight tone.
Yeah, a lot of times I do a lot of straight tone, blared out straight tone, but it's always in conjunction with the first thing that you do, which is breathe. So if you're not setting up the breath correctly, you can't start the sound correctly with an open throat, so you can't get the air through. So it all kind of works together. But that's the first thing you do is breathe.
Okay. And if someone's hoarse, do you usually have them rest the voice, or are there exercises that you do to help them? Some people say, I like to do falsetto. Some people...
No, if you're hoarse, meaning that the cords are irritated, either because you've done something wrong or you just got fatigued, you have to rest. The rest is as important as the lesson, as Tom used to say.
How long do you suggest someone rests if they're a little hoarse?
So it's completely back to normal.
So complete. Do you say complete silence, or you can talk and stuff, but just wait?
No, I never say complete silence. Like you could talk and stuff like that. And actually, I always tell people, if you're going to sing, make sure you get up and you start talking. Because the blood has to start flowing through your cords.
Right.
It's like warming up the body for a race. But if within the course of a lesson, you're going to do stuff wrong. I'm going to ask you to sing, a note, and you're going to go, and, swing and miss. That's going to irritate your cords. Or even if you don't swing and miss, you're using muscles. The problem is, this is one of the big problems. The vocal cords don't really have nerve endings, so we don't recognize it as a muscle. When you use your bicep or something, it's like, oh yeah, I can feel it working. We don't feel that working, so we think, oh well, it's not tired. No, if you can't get clarity in core, if it's, it's tired, you need to rest. And when it's back to normal, we work again.
Do you feel like a healthy voice, the falsetto would be there? If someone's got a healthy voice, they'll have falsetto?
Falsetto typically shows the condition of the voice. So if you're singing and all of a sudden, the falsetto's kind of wispy, or you can't quite get, rest. Rest is super important, and never try to make your voice work.
Right.
And we as singers want to get it right, and you have to rest. You can't push it that way.
What about UC Bierling saying you must breathe into the chest, sing high into the chest, or breathe in? What do you think of that comment?
You must breathe into the chest.
He said anyone that breathes low is like ruining their voice. It's one of his like favorite quotes or something like that. I could probably find it.
Well, I would say to him, well, maybe he should have had a conversation with Pencil and Rufo, who were vocally vastly superior to anything he did. And they didn't do that. They did the opposite. No, I mean, the thing with Bierling is, and I don't think people realize this, but he had a very, very small voice. But small voices tend to record very well. But it's like Tom saw him live and said he was with his friends, and they were like, oh, maybe he's saving his voice for the second part. And nothing ever came out, and it was really disappointing. And then even Jerome Hines wrote about it. When he sang with Bierling, he was extremely disappointed that his voice was so small. Like you couldn't really hear him. And Merrill talked about it too when they recorded Rigoletto, and Bierling made sure that his face was in the microphone above everybody else, because everybody else was blowing him out. So, Bierling, yeah, there's other people better I'd rather listen to.
How about, that's what I was going to ask. So you said a little bit about the acoustical registers and then a physical one. So how many registers would you say are for like a male?
2. But just one last thing about the breathing, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see these guys kind of lift their chest, like Delmonico will do that sometimes because he's very, his acting is very dramatic. But the thing is, even if you lift your chest, what you'll usually notice is as they start singing, the chest completely deflates and relaxes as they're singing a sound, because you can't get air through if your chest is lifted. Gotcha. So what'll happen is they'll have this bravura, breathe in your chest. And they start singing and it completely relaxes, But anyway, so you're asking me about, what did you say again?
What did I say? What did I say? Wait. Breathing. Oh my God, I know I just had something. What the heck did I say? Oh, that's it, registers. So you say there's just chest and falsetto.
Yeah, so, and this is why. So when you're singing in chest or head voice or covered chest, it's all chest. Head voice is just a lighter form of chest. And what I mean by that is...
That's for women, though, head voice.
Or men when they're singing quietly. They go more towards head voice, less chest.
Okay.
Depending on the range. If you're really high where you need to also keep depth, it'll still kind of be covered. But... chest voice is when the body of the chords engage. The thyroarytenoid is engaged. Pure falsetto is only when the edges vibrate. So only in pure falsetto is it a kind of a different register physically. And everything else, you're vibrating the full body of the chords. There's no other difference. You're either doing it fully, full chest, a little lighter, but you still have chest in there. So there's only 2 registers. and then there's the cover.
And the cover is, in your words again?
The cover is fully engaged chest with a low larynx and open pharyngeal space.
And then as they go up in the cover, say from F to B flat, would you say that the vowel starts to, your after the G starts to open a little bit again?
Or is it? Well, when you're really skilled, you'll generally be able to keep the vowels pretty clear. But that takes development of those muscles, so to keep it open. What typically happens is as you go into you go kind of more ooh into the cover, helps to start develop those muscles, but you still understand the vowels. A and E should still be very clear when you're singing up there. And that has to do with the tongue. So if you're doing the tongue behind the teeth, you're never going to have a clear vowel. You can't sing A and E into the high notes, which all the old singers do sing clear A and E in the high notes. If you listen to them, it's very clear.
Right.
If it's behind the teeth, you have no choice but to make like a neutral vowel sound. So no, the vowel should still be fairly clear.
Okay.
Still be very clear. The thing with the cover is you can't lose the lowering of the larynx and the opening of the pharyngeal space, but you can still understand the vowel. With the thing with the vowel is that, is the vowel ah? Is it ah? Is it ah? Is it ah? I mean, there's always variations within a vowel, right? So you still understand it though. But when people do when they talk about modifying the vowel to the point where you don't even understand the word anymore, no, a fa li, and they're going no, a fa la, and it's not even close to E.
Right.
It's a different word, and that's usually because they haven't mastered the use of the tongue.
Do you find too also what they'll do is when they go up, I know in contemporary singing, a lot of teachers will teach, as they go higher in the E vowel to make it an A vowel at the top, and that then they never really actually cover. They never actually cover because of that, because it keeps on getting wider and wider. So
no, if they're uncovering, no, that's bad. I mean, you should be able to understand the A vowel covered and the E vowel covered.
Right.
Very, very clearly. But again, that has to do with the position of the tongue. The tongue forms the vowel sounds. So if you don't get the position right, if you're holding it behind your teeth, or if the root goes in your throat, both are bad.
Is it pretty natural? Would you say a lot of people are just, if you don't mess with the way you would just say your vowels, you don't have to worry about your tongue too much?
I'll say usually people that come in, if there's talent and they haven't been messed up by bad teaching, you can usually get their tongue to go to the position just by saying sing E and open your mouth, and it'll just go there because it's a natural function. Now, I like to explain that that's how it works so that somebody else doesn't come along and mess it up. But generally, it'll happen, and you'll see kids even do that naturally. The tongue retracts, they hey, or ah, or whatever, just naturally, because that's how the body works, So the vocal cords are giving off this harmonic energy, and the tongue, by its position, dampens or enhances those overtones, and that forms the vowel. So the position of the tongue is really important, and it's important for opening the pharyngeal space, and it's actually part of the breathing.
Do you mess with people's soft palates at all?
No, the soft palate really, when people talk raise the soft palate, the only thing that does is lower your larynx. Like literally put your finger on your larynx.
Right.
Raise your soft palate.
Yeah.
But the problem is, which could be good if someone comes in with a high larynx, but you become addicted to that, and then everything starts getting too much. Pressed, so everything has to be within balance. You might use it for a little while as a tool,
right?
But it's all about what each person needs, what they're lacking. You do the exercises to develop that thing and then bring it into balance.
Nice.
Nice.
Is there anything else you'd like to say? We did an hour. That was great. That went by fast. Is there anything you could do you have tell people about your website or in your YouTube page? And then I'll put it in the link too on YouTube. I'll put it in the description.
Yeah, I mean they can go on my the blog or the Facebook page, Voice Maestro page, or the YouTube channel. I have 2 YouTube channels, but they can find it within there. And
so how does it? What is your website?
The website for Facebook is, hold on, let me tell you. It's Mr. Silver Voice Maestro, and the URL is, hold on, it's coming up. Facebook.com/Silver Singing Method.
Okay. And then your blog is?
And the blog is silvervoicestudio.blogspot.com.
Okay. And then the YouTube page is?
My YouTube page is, I think it's under the same. Hold on, it's youtube.com/ hold on, my computer's being a little slow.
No worries.
If they want to go on my YouTube channel, my one channel, which has a lot of Tom's recordings on it too, it's Silver Singing Method. So it's,
okay.
Yeah. And then my other one I have, this has a lot of before and afters on it. Okay. The other one that I have. But they can find that through that link. So if they,
well, I'm glad we got a chance to talk, and I don't think you're as controversial as everyone was making you out to be. I think you're just passionate and you know what you're talking about, and you want to help spread the word and call out a few charlatans, which I think is great.
I just try to tell the truth and get the information out there. Of course, whenever you do that, you're going to, it's hard sometimes online when you just have words on a page. They can be very much, I'm just, like you said, passionate about it. And I would like to see great voices come back. We don't hear those anymore, and it's unfortunate. So
that's excellent. No, I'm glad I got a chance to really appreciate you doing this with me. And so that was podcast number 14, Real Singers on Singing, with Mr. Jeremy Silver Singing Method. Is that it?
The Silver Singing Method, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. All right. Yeah. Hold on one second. I'm going to hang up with the recorder, but then I'll say something to you. All right. Take care, everybody. See you later. Bye.